Welcome to the Upshot, multi-world disc golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the publisher, Charlie Eisenhood. Josh Mansfield joins me, and Josh Mansfield is fresh off of his first ever concert of his entire life.
Sure.
What was the bet? I forget why you were.
I think it was Eagle winning European Open.
Okay.
Because he came in a final round, and I was like, "There's just no way. There's no way this guy puts it together for another round."
He sure did.
He sure did.
So you had the horrible punishment of having to go to a concert
right?
of one of your favorite bands. So who did you see? Tell us about it.
Yes. So I went to the Vivint Arena, which is where the Jazz play down in Salt Lake, to see Panic at the Disco.
Okay.
We roll up. I think we were like 20 minutes early. When we're in our seats, right? And the stadium is empty, and it hits like 5 till, and the stadium is still empty. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And so I'm like looking at my tickets. I'm like, was it supposed to be 7:30? Not really sure what's going on. 7 on the dot, the first opening act plays. He was terrible. So bad. Did not enjoy his music.
There was nobody there to hear him.
There's nobody here. Everybody else got the memo that you should not go to this opening act.
See, Josh, this is the thing. You've never been to a concert, so you don't know how these things go.
No.
You assume that the band starts right at the top.
Well, I knew there was an opening act. The only reason I knew that, though, is because we joked about it before, because I thought it was called like the pre-show or something, or the pre-concert.
Right. Yes.
Right. And so I now know that it's opening act. But anyway, first one, not good. If anyone is a fan of that artist, if they feel the desire to go look it up, then so be it. And then the second opening act was Marina, who I guess is like a Welsh artist that does like electric pop and stuff. And she was like, it's not really my style of music, but it was very apparent to me how much better of a performer she was than the first guy. Okay. And so that was like night and day. And I was like, oh, okay, this is much more enjoyable. I may be able to handle this tonight. And then Panic at the Disco came on, and it was like Marina was good, but he was just an outstanding performer. And I guess now that I think about it, I've never really been in a situation to have like to be like to have an entertainer, right? Like I've been to real small things like halftime shows at college games or whatever, but like he is an entertainer, and I was very impressed with the product. There were significantly more lasers and flamethrowers and like fireworks that I was expecting going into this show. But it was very clear he's an entertainer. It was very exciting. I enjoyed it a lot. My biggest complaint is that I wish I had not gone to the opening acts, because it's hard to keep your energy level like matching the energy of the concert for 4 hours.
Sure.
It was a long time. And so I found myself in some of the middle songs that I just wasn't as familiar with. I found myself getting like just feeling worn down. And it wasn't until we kind of got to the end and the final performance that it started.
They hit all the jams at the end.
Right. Of course. Right. They hit the popular ones at the beginning, at the end. And I think in a world where I didn't go to the opening act and it just showed up at 9:00, I would have been much more like, I would have enjoyed the middle of the main performance significantly more. But by then I was just like, man, I've been listening to music
go home
louder than I've ever heard in my life for 3.5 hours now. I don't know how much longer I want to do this. So very good. I now think I would understand how to go about a concert a little better next time.
Will you attend more concerts in the future?
Probably, but I don't think the music was the biggest thing for me. Like I enjoyed listening to music, but like it wasn't a sensational performance musical wise, right? I thought the music was good. It was about the entirety of the show that was really big for me. So I would go to what?
The entertainment.
The entertainment, correct. So I would go to another concert if I would do my research before I went to my next concert and make sure that they were an entertainer as well.
Sure.
Because I don't think I would go just for a band that I enjoy if they are not also excellent entertainers.
Well, I'm glad you had the chance to go.
Yeah.
And you know what? I will say this. I can't say nothing about Panic at the Disco. I know nothing about the live performance of their music. Some bands or, artists that you love just aren't good live. Like the music. Like it's not always the best. When you see a great musical show, the music being the key great part. Now, yes, all the bells and whistles, I appreciate that stuff, but when you see a great musical concert, it really is something special. And it sounds like that's not what you got here. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
These big bands, it's not always going to be like that, especially in an arena setting. It's hard.
Right.
But I hope that you get to try that sometime too. But maybe it's just not for you. Maybe it's just not for you. Maybe the entertainment side is the key.
I'm open to recommendations if you know of a band, like, 'cause I just picked a band that I liked, right? Like, I don't know. So if you have suggestions for great musical entertainment, I would take that. But at the end, I was leaving and my wife and I were chatting and she was like, what did you think? And I said, I think I would still choose to go to a live sporting event and go to a jazz game versus a concert. Like, if you gave me that option of a Friday night or a Saturday night, I could go to another concert or go to a jazz game, I would definitely pick the jazz game.
I'm not going to lie to you.
So,
me too. And that's why we do a sports podcast.
That's why
2 to 3 times per week.
Sports podcast.
Yes. No. Friday night Knicks. Go Knicks. NBA season starts today. Go Knicks. Old school Knicks logo right there. Let's go, baby. That's as good as he gets. Like,
we're just talking NBA today, right?
Yeah, it's an NBA podcast now.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So let's dive into the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. The 2022 season's over, Josh.
It is.
Just like that. It was here and it was gone. I feel like the smoothness of this season was very apparent to me. We had very few times during the year where I felt like there was a big lull. Having Europe back was so refreshing. But that's the time of the year when I tend to kind of like get a little burned out, a little tired of watching disc golf. But having Europe, there's like the natural break right before, and then you get this major on another continent and all of the energy of the thousands of people who are coming out there. And then you're back, and then you have these, important tournaments late in the season with some woods and the beautiful courses up in Vermont and Massachusetts, and then on to USDGC, which was extremely entertaining this year. And then we finish up with the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. Your winners, Kristen Tatar and Ricky Wysocki. It's the first time that we've had the number one seeds going into the tournament win the tournament in both divisions. And I don't necessarily want to say, they were dominant performances, but Kristen won comfortably and was not really challenged. She shot the hot round both in the semifinals and the finals. Nobody else shot a 5 under the whole week. And then Ricky, had to come up with some serious heroics to beat Isaac Robinson late. And, it wasn't like a wire-to-wire type of win. Honestly, I thought Isaac was going to win when we were around, hole 12, 13. It was looking like Isaac was really starting to take control of the round. But Ricky battled back and then got incredible back-to-back birdies on 18 to close out regulation and then to win in a playoff on a hole that was very, very difficult to birdie for anybody this week. So they both take home $35,000. Kristen Tatar had the money all-time single-season record in either division for earnings in a season for about 3 or 4 hours until Ricky broke that by winning.
By a very slim margin, by the way.
Slim margin.
Yes.
$103,000, just a little over 103 for Kristen Tatar this year, and $105,776 for Ricky. That is the all-time high in both MPO and FPO, respectively. So, Josh, what do you make of the Pro Tour Championship?
One small correction, Charlie, and I know this is probably my bad from when we were talking about it in show prep. So if you click on player stats, it gives Kristen the 5 under, but if you actually go to round scores, it combined her 2 rounds, which were a 3 under and a 2 under. Valerie also shot a 5 under in quarterfinal. So Valerie actually had the hot round, but then Kristen's 3 under and 2 under both were the only under par on semis and finals. So I misled you.
Oh, but that's so weird. In UDisc. Oh, where did I see that?
I
don't know what happened. I must have been in the player stats tab. Yes.
Me too.
Okay,
and that's where I got messed up as well.
I got confused. Okay, yes. My bad.
UDisc shuffles the scores weird. We both looked at it kind of weird. It doesn't really know how to handle this format.
Right.
And because Valerie had to play 4 rounds or 3 rounds, it combined all of her other rounds, which were over par rounds. And that's why if you go to player stats, it shows her only being at 1 under par.
Yeah, it makes sense because I was thinking in my head, I was like, I didn't think she shot a 5 under in the final round.
I didn't either.
I thought she shot just a couple strokes under par, and that is what she did. She shot 2 down. Did. So I apologize
too, because when I was typing out the show notes, it was really funny, and this is, I think, a good segue into talking about FPO a little bit. When I was typing out the show notes, I was really surprised because my first reaction was, Owen couldn't stop hitting trees, Missy couldn't putt, and Valerie couldn't clutch, and then I was like, and Kristen just didn't blow up. And then I looked and I was like, 5 under, holy crap, maybe that's not, wow, I guess my gut instinct was wrong. No, not the case. Kristen played really solid golf. She didn't
and for what it's worth, Kristen was 4 under through 17 and then had sort of a really low stakes 18 where it was just like, don't totally screw it up, because she was up by 4 strokes and she took a double bogey, but it was meaningless.
Right. What's remarkable to me is that 2 things. Number one is that she didn't take any big numbers except for 18, which, again, by that point, the story was done and it didn't matter what she did. The avoiding of big numbers in a course that was described as having rough that is more difficult than Northwood Black is a big deal. I caught the correction. And that's an important thing that Kristen was able to accomplish. The second thing is that she was birdieing at the right times to make sure that she was able to capitalize on other players' mistakes. And Missy missing some really low and felt like makeable putts, missing long. Her double bogey on 7, I think, was the 3 putt that just was a disaster hole for her. And dropped her quickly back out of the lead, where at the beginning I was thinking big money Missy, and then quickly kind of fell apart and derailed from there with the double, then a bogey and a couple pars. Whereas in that same stretch, Kristen went 2 under par. So that 5-stroke swing at that point really felt like the momentum shifted, and Owen just really struggled to get things rolling. So it was kind of a weird FPO finals because Kristen did well, but by no means was it her dominant performance that we've seen in the season. Just nobody was there to really challenge her when she wasn't pressing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the round ratings, and I think it tells a story. I mean, it's like not the greatest shooting we've seen from Kristen, but it was very good. It was 996 rated in the finals, 1008 rated in round 3, and 996. If you took any random tournament and you say, okay, you shoot a 996, do you win that round, right? Because that's what this is, right? You have to win the round. And a lot of times the answer is no. A lot of times players who shoot the hot round in a day are around the 1,000 rating mark or up to 10, 20 sometimes. And so, but keep in mind, again, 2 strokes given away late would have been up around that 10-ish mark, 10:05 to 10:10.
And that's true.
If she really needed to get a par there, I think that she probably would have. So all around, what a season for Kristen Tatar. I mean, that's what this means to me. I think you can talk about the individual ups and downs of this particular weekend and this particular tournament, and every player has a great story. At the end of the day, like, look at the 4 players up at the top. I feel like it tells a little bit of the story of the season, doesn't it? The players who make the final here. Kristen Tatar, who has clearly had one of the best seasons of all time in FPO. If she played more of the majors and she played more of the middle of the season, I think it would be even higher up the board. Only having the one major victory feels like a little bit of a pockmark on what was otherwise just a tremendous year where she never missed the podium. She earned the most money of all time and was just totally unstoppable in the back half of the season. Then you have Owen Scoggins, second highest rated player in the world, had this just career year in her 40s and is everybody's favorite player. I mean, it's just incredible. And then you have, I want to skip to Valerie, who had kind of a rough patch there relatively in the middle to back half of the year, but comes back and finishes with a big payday, making the top 4. And we talked at the beginning of the season, she's part of the big 4. Now, I don't know if she's there, but notice who's not there. Paige Pierce is not there. Mm-hmm. Because Paige Pierce did not play great disc golf for the last 3 months. She just hasn't.
Was it after European
and instead
Open?
It was Missy Gannon, who has played great late in the season, now back-to-back years. And I don't want to tell you that Missy Gannon had a better season than Paige, but certainly Paige wishes we could go back to the beginning of the year because it just has not been the same since when? Since
Ledgestone.
I guess Ledgestone. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, and I don't know. Tied for 4th at D-Glow is also not, with Kristen not present, right? That's one of the big notes there, is that Kristen did not play at D-Glow, and it just, I don't think, if I remember right, Paige wasn't even in contention at that tournament. So she tied for 4th with Valerie, and then tied for 3rd at Ledgestone, and then after that, 5th. The problem is that she has some finishes that by a lot of people's standards would not be bad. 5th place at Worlds, for example, not bad. It's the manner and the fact that she was out of contention and worked her way back up into 5th.
And it's about her status as the greatest player in the history of the sport in the FPO division.
Right.
Like, of course, there's going to be higher expectations.
And then there was GMC, where she finished 18th. Which
disaster.
That's bad by a lot of FPO standards.
Right. But to me, this is the Tatar just proving once again that she's the best player on earth right now. And other people are going to have to come take her crown next year. Mm-hmm. Other people are going to, a lot of players have something that they need to work on. Kristen really doesn't. Kristen's game is very complete right now. And where do you knock her? I mean, I think you already laid out the case, Josh. It's like when she's in a tight race or like within a stroke going deep into a round, does she sometimes not hit the shots that she typically hits? Maybe. That's really the only area where you can kind of like find a weakness because the driving is great, the forehand is great, the putting is great. Her ability to putt from just feet planted in the ground, straddle with just the hip hop, I mean, it's amazing because it gives her range and consistency, and it means that if she's obstructed, she just straddles out from behind the tree, no problem. And I think, distance probably is the one area where you could be like, she could still improve. But other players need to learn a forehand.
Yes.
Other players need to learn to putt. So, like, Kristen's going into next season, Kristen's going to be number 1, and somebody else is going to have to come take it.
Well, and think of the other distance throwers that we have on tour right now. You have Henna and Evelina, who can't putt at all. And you have the likes of like Ella and Holland, who are excellent players, but are still very new to the sport and are developing.
And just don't have the kind of precision with upshots that Kristen does.
Correct.
I'll drive Kristen by 75 feet and then put their upshot further away than Kristen.
Correct. And they have a less likelihood than making that putt than Kristen would either.
Yes.
Right. So when you think about the players who gain significant advantage on Kristen in distance, and not just like a couple of feet, but meaningful distance to make a difference on long courses.
Sure.
I don't think it's as bad as it looks because those players just aren't able to capitalize on the potential that their game has thanks to their distance. And until they catch up, Kristen, I think, is still going to remain incredibly competitive and win lots of events, even with the lesser distance than others. Because we have to also be very honest about where Kristen's at in her career. I know we've talked about this. What, 30?
She's in her early 30s.
Like, you're not gaining significant distance in your early 30s relative to your athletic prime. At this point, it's probably mostly about maintaining the distance that she does have as long as possible. And so until those other players who are long throwers are able to develop the other parts of her game, I don't think that distance is going to become a deficiency. That's going to be where we see Kristen begin to fall off in relevance, though, is when those players who also have incredible distance begin to improve the completeness of their game to a competitive level.
Yes.
Because at that point, I don't think Kristen has... It's just time in which Kristen is just not going to be able to turn it around.
Many of the players you just described have the opportunity to become better players than Kristen.
Yes.
Because they have a raw ability to throw it so far, which, is a fundamental part of success in disc golf, as we all understand. And, Evelina and Hannah have been driving better than Kristen most of the season. But if you can't make your putts and you take 3 and 4 putts on a regular basis, you're never going to win. And that's what we've seen. Neither of them won a tournament the whole year. And, they were routinely were at the top of strokes gained tee to green. Routinely. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously a huge weakness. And then I think you could say the same thing for Ella and Holland. Those players don't have as glaring a weakness as Evelina and Hannah do with the putt. But, they still have to make substantial improvements to their consistency and their accuracy and their touch. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, clearly you've seen the skills and the tools. So, next year should be really exciting. I think players have a really clear sense of what they need to go work on in this offseason. And if a player wants to come out next year and try to go for that crown and be the best player, they're going to have to get to work. Take a week off, and then it's time to get to work. Because Kristen's going to get to work. Kristen's in the gym in the offseason. You can tell.
Yep.
So it's, if you just want to chill and hang out on the beach and whatever, I mean, fine, but you're not going to be the best player.
I've got a question for you for next season, and maybe this is a little too much, and we'll talk more about it. But the 4 throwers that we just listed who outdrive Kristen right now, Holland, Ella, Evelina, and Henna. Which of the 4 do you think are most likely to get their first win next season?
Well,
to get a win next season. Okay, none of them won this season. Right. Some of them have not gotten their first Elite Series win, but Evelina and Henna have. So next season, if you had to pick one of those 4 to win, which one do you think is most likely?
God. I'm going to say Henna.
I think that's my answer too.
Combination of age, just unbelievable throwing skill displayed at the end of the season, and not as just like totally neurotic a putter as Evelina. I think struggles a little bit with the nerves. I mean, I've talked about it on the show. When she is not at the top of the tournament, at the top of the leaderboard in contention, she putts pretty well, but she gets nervous and then makes errors. Mm-hmm. That's different than Evelina, who's like gone many months of this year just physically unable to make putts at any point. And I think that's a harder thing to overcome. But I think also Henna needs to they need to get away from each other from like the putting side of things. Like they shouldn't be practicing together. Like y'all need to work it out on your own and not feed into each other's like neuroses on the green. And I know they're close friends, and of course, but I think that's going to be important. But that's my answer, because I just think we've seen Henna be close multiple times in the last couple of months, and she's so young and she's so talented. I mean, so is Evelina, but whose putter is going to get better first? I mean, in some ways I'm just guessing, but right. I think it can be Henna.
I think the other answer for me is actually Holland. She is in her putting, not a great putter. But she's at 72% C1X, which is good for 22nd on tour. She's also 16%, which is good for 9th in Circle 2 putting. But she's 3rd in fairway hits. She is 5th in parked, 6th in Circle 1 in regulation, 7th in Circle 2 in regulation. The big knock against Holland is her scramble. She's 30th in scramble at only 33%, which goes back to kind of that upshot precision. But what really impresses me about Holland is that she also has a power forehand as well. And like Kristen, is very, very strong both in her ability to throw a very far backhand, but also as well as a power forehand. And I think that's going to be a combo that's going to be important to distinguish her from this group, because I think her forehand is the best of the four. So I think Holland is the other answer for me that feels likely to get a win.
And the big plus in Holland's column is that she's just improved dramatically.
Yes.
Over the last year. Like, I just went back and looked at her 2021 stats. What was her Circle 1 in regulation this year, Josh?
Circle 1 in regulation this year was 6th, 35%.
22% last year. Her putting, you said, was 72?
Yep.
66 last year. Circle 2 putting was 10% last year.
This is with a larger sample size because she played twice as many tournaments this season,
right?
Which is even more impressive to me.
Yeah. We had Aaron Howard actually did a little research on, like, how quickly do the stats conform to averages? Mm-hmm. You know, how many tournaments do you need? How much of a sample size do you need? It's less than you think.
Really?
It's like, yeah, I think, I forget what his results were. There's an article up on Ultiworld about it. It's like 8 rounds or something. It's like pretty quick to start to conform to player averages. But Holland leveled up in literally every single category this year. And she's super young, so I love it. I mean, we've certainly seen the athlete, like, takeover type mindset, you know, and she's a little on the older side relative to some of the other players we're talking about here. But, you know, I think that with that comes more maturity and all of the other things that go along with getting older. So I love the answer there. Let's talk about Ricky and Isaac and the battle. And I talked a little bit in it was my Rapid React segment yesterday, Josh. We missed
apologies.
You, but we had a nice time talking with subscribers on the air.
Good.
And I talked about how this was ripe in MPO for, like, a really clear narrative story about the emergence of the young players taking over the mantle from Ricky and Paul, or Ricky and Paul proving that once again their dominance is still the story of the hour, and Isaac and Gannon, the most promising prospects on tour, are still not quite there yet. And instead, we got kind of a mixed bag. I don't really want to draw. I mean, it would be totally silly in some ways to draw big conclusions after one round. But the fact that these 4 guys were the ones in the finals, it says a lot, doesn't it? Gannon backs up the USDGC performance by making it to the final. Isaac Robinson has showed us incredible ceiling and, you know, really should have won. I mean, I think he should have won this tournament. I think he should have won this round, and he just got nervous and started missing putts late in the round. He just looked uncomfortable a lot of times. I mean, he missed that bunny left side chains that was, like, I don't know, 20 feet. I mean, he had a little bit of an obstruction on the right side, but, you know, there were just a bunch of putts where if he makes it, he wins. And, you know, both he and Ricky make the mistakes on 17, but ultimately, you have the 2 greatest players that have defined this generation and the 2 players that look most likely to define the next generation together here on the card. And I don't know where you want to put Eagle in the conversation there about generational. Like, he's like the tweener, right?
Right.
He's a good bit younger than Ricky and Paul, and I don't know how much older he is than Isaac and Gannon, but, you know, it's at least 5 years older than those guys.
Well, Isaac's 22 though, so I don't think he's significantly old. I think Eagle's only like 24.
Like 23?
23, 24, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll pull this up.
I need to keep
going.
list of ages at all times in front of me so that I can just But you have my point, right? Newcomers to tour. Eagle's is really a tour veteran at this point, but he's kind of like bridging this gap. So what will we see in the future? I mean, time will tell. But I thought it was a very nice encapsulation of what we saw this year on tour. We saw some veteran success. We also saw some explosive new faces on tour having great years. And, Gannon Buhr had the lowest average finish on tour this season at Elite Series and Majors. And a USDGC win. Pretty amazing. Isaac gets the big win, and while not as consistent as Gannon, showed us arguably higher highs.
Eagle is 24. Isaac is 22. So they are closer in age. Gannon's 17. Isaac feels younger, but it's because he went to college first and finished that before he began on tour.
Yep.
I think with Isaac and that higher high, like you talked about, I always go back to the comment that Macbeth made in our most recent interview with him when he said that had he played his best, he felt like he could have won any tournament this year except for Idlewild because nobody could have caught Isaac no matter how well they were playing. Like, what a compliment.
That's a big compliment.
It's a big compliment. You know what was most, and this was mentioned a couple of times on the broadcast, but the most stark contrast for me, it's the way that Gannon and Isaac interacted with each other versus the no love lost between Ricky and Paul. and there's significantly more history there, but it was especially just funny to me in a season where they are taking passing shots at each other and each other's seasons and accomplishments about who's having the better season and just kind of the social media, not even interaction because they never directly interacted. It was interacting with other people's posts about the other person. So it was very passive aggressive and
proxy war in the media.
Right. And with that, so you have this kind of beef between Ricky and Paul, which, you've had different levels of for a decade now. And then you have like Isaac and Gannon who look like they're asking each other what they should do on their next shot. And it was a very stark difference. And it's interesting because it really looks like those, we talk about this often. Sponsorships are not teams. Manufacturers playing for the same manufacturer does not mean you are on a team per se, as much as they like to use that language. You are there because you help make the company money, whether that's by winning tournaments or selling discs or what have you. Discmania has always had that feeling a little bit, thanks to the Crush Brothers branding that, you get like Kyle getting to jump onto, but especially Eagle and Simon in the past. And and their vlogs, especially with Casey White, give that kind of camaraderie feeling that Discmania has always enjoyed. But the adding of Kyle Klein to it dilutes that a little bit, but you have like the shirt thing with Eagle and Kyle. So very, very team oriented as it feels. But Prodigy right now, their MPO team feels like a team. They are caddying for each other. Gannon is spending his off days walking and caddying for the other Prodigy players. Thomas is caddying for Gannon. They are asking each other about shots. They practice together. They tour together. All of them feel like a team. And that's a marked difference, I think, from even a couple of years ago relative to the other kind of interactions with a lot of other players. You have players who are friends, German Sexton, thanks to the Jomez and Big Sexy. Innova markets that. They sell stuff with that on it. But it's just not this is kind of unique in the way that I've perceived it relative to other manufacturers and their players.
You bring up a great point about Prodigy. I talked about this in the React show. We're going to have to talk more about manufacturer stuff and off-season stuff that's coming up. We don't want to get to that today, but Prodigy has stumbled upon this incredible opportunity where they have the most exciting young talent on tour on their roster right now. Mm-hmm. And they, when we came into the season, it looked like they had a total disaster off season. Chris Dickerson just like ripping them, and Katrina's gone, and like Heather Young leaves the tour, and it's just like carnage. Yeah. And then, wow, look at these: Alden Harris, Gannon Buhr, Isaac Robinson, like some great stories coming out of the Prodigy camp. And now they got to pony up the bucks. Isaac Robinson going to need to get paid. We're going to talk more about players getting paid a little bit later in the show. Let's talk a little more about this round and this tournament. It was kind of crazy, Josh. When Gannon birdied 17, all of a sudden he's back in the mix, and he throws this crazy roller. The spotter from 18 was in the React show talking about the roller and like his perspective on how it almost came back in, but the boards kind of stood it up and then it rode the rail the whole way and stayed OB. But if that curls back, I don't care how far away he was going to be, he was going to jam it. He was going to make that putt. You know this. And he would have been in the playoff too, and who knows what could have been. But instead, Ricky just ultra clutch mode, monster drive on 18 twice. And then it was like the literal exact same upshot to almost exactly the same spot on the green and then exactly into the basket the same way. Eerie stuff, but a well-earned victory for the player who finished number one in the point standings and wins the Tour Championship, wins the most money. We're going to talk after the break about whether he's a player of the year or not. So we'll get to that. But Josh, to get 18 twice like that, it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And it's funny because I actually thought he had missed the putt in regulation because it was so low. I thought it was going to hit the cage and miss. And it just, all it needed was that half an inch of clearance. And it was an elevated basket. And so I think the perception probably looked a little bit off with the camera. It probably was closer, or a little bit more clear than I thought. But man, I thought he missed it in regulation. And after he made it, it just really felt like, Isaac's game plan, it didn't feel like Isaac had practiced the birdie shot. That's honestly what it felt like, because his drive was the exact same drive that it was in regulation and never set him up for the birdie look.
Can you blame him? He's got a stroke and nobody's been birdieing 18 at all. You can't go for birdie there and risk going out of bounds and blowing yourself up, right?
You do in the playoff, though.
In the playoff, after you just saw what Rick did, maybe you're right.
I think in the playoff you have to, because Isaac played it exactly like,
sure,
the whole let's hope Ricky makes a mistake, and I don't know, that works with some players, but I don't think that's the best game plan against someone like Ricky or Paul.
After watching him do
bang,
it, bang,
right?
Bang.
Yeah, it was clear that Ricky had practiced that. It was clear because it wasn't even a hero shot per se. It was a really excellent drive that did bring in more danger, but was something obviously replicable. And it was a power of forehand with an overstable disc. Like, Ricky's going to make that 9 times out of 10. He's going to make it 99 times out of 100.
How do you feel about the fact that this was the playoff hole? After all of the grind of the woods, then they just replay the only open hole on the course.
Here's the options. You either go back to the woods for the grind, or nobody gets to watch the playoff. So I think it's probably the right call so that you can have spectators. But we can talk more about that. Not DGPT's finest moment, but we'll get to that. I think that it was Isaac did not practice the birdie shot. And whether that's a mistake of youth or tour inexperience or just his limited shot selection because he doesn't have the forehand, maybe he did practice the birdie shot once. And then once he was at where Ricky was, realized it didn't matter because he doesn't have a good shot in order to get to the basket. So he decided there was no gain for him by pushing that drive further because he doesn't have the forehand. That, I don't know which of the two it is, but it's clear that he did not have that capacity, and that set Ricky up really well for the win.
Yep. It was an interesting round. I mean, of course, with everybody starting at even par, it really felt like it could have gone any direction. Everybody had chances. You can't argue that people didn't have chances.
Paul had chances.
Even
late.
That's true. He just couldn't seem to hit the drives that he needed.
Yeah.
Down the stretch in the back nine. You look at the results. I mean, he ended up minus 3.5 strokes gained tee to green. And Ricky got it done by putting, basically. He didn't miss inside the circle. He hit 25% of his circle 2 putts. And Isaac Robinson faltered, even though he was, I think, throwing the disc a little better than Ricky overall in the round.
He's also the better putter usually.
Yeah, it's true.
And very clearly nervous. Very
clearly nervous. But, big paydays for everybody. I don't weep for these guys finishing second and third and whatnot.
You know who's weeping right now? Valerie Mondahano, who misses a gimme putt at the end of the FPO round. So Missy misses her putt, and I'm like, oh man, I said it. I said it I was watching with a couple people. I said, there goes $2,500 that Missy just missed because of that putt. And then Valerie goes up and doinks it, and I'm like, well, there's Missy's $2,500 back because they ended up sharing it. They had to split that.
Right.
Brutal on Valerie's part.
Yeah, and we saw Valerie emotional again after some mistakes in the round, and you can see how bad she wants to win. She has such a bright future still. I think that she's another player. We hadn't talked about her. I mean, she's maybe not the most explosive distance thrower on tour or anything like that, but such an incredible, well-rounded game. I think in a lot of ways reminds me of Kristen in some ways. Hasn't been as consistent, hasn't been as top end, obviously, but another player that I think we could see have a really great 2023 season. It's a lot on your mind to be like, I could make thousands of dollars if I just make this short putt. I might miss it too. I would miss it. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk Player of the Year. And we've got a little question from our email, upshot@ultiworld.com. And we also got to talk a little bit about some signing news, Josh. So we will get to that right after this. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Did you know that Pound makes more than disc golf backpacks? That's right. They've got beverage carriers. I've got one. They're awesome. They've got travel bags like the Fly Pack. You can even get a toolbox to have a practice bag in the trunk of your car, a fanny pack, packing cubes, and a whole lot more. Go to PoundDiscGolf.com and trick yourself out with Pound bags for every aspect of your bag needs. Welcome back to the Upshot. A couple of signings to announce. We've already got our hot stove cooking in this offseason and a couple of talented young players getting locked up for years to come. Kyle Klein re-signs with Discmania, and he is signed through 2026, so a 4-year extension on his contract. And what we know about this, he's going to be guaranteed 6 figures per year with the opportunity to earn more through royalties and other incentives. We've seen Discmania really rolling out the big deals for the stars that they want to keep under lock and key. Simon is coming up on the final year of his 5-year contract. Eagles contract coming up as well next season, and now Kyle's locked up, but Eagles on a 3-year or 4-year. I think he's on a 3-year. And so Kyle's now on a 4-year. So Discmania keeping their young talent under their brand.
It makes sense. They have incredible talent, lots of wins, and when going into the season, we looked and we thought, Kyle had the potential to kind of carry the flag with Eagle out, and then it was Simon. And so there's just a variety of ways that Discmania is going to be able to win. It makes for an impressive MPO team and some rising FPO talent as well, especially in Ella Hansen. So, good team.
And then we've got Calvin Heimburg, who extends his Innova deal for 5 years. Contract year, Calvin got the bag, Josh. And, I think a lot of people were excited for months of speculation about what was going to happen with Calvin. But this is exactly what we said all the way back in January when we're starting to talk about contract year Calvin. It was like, Innova must pay this man. Innova must pay this man. And they did. And they just put out a signature Toro. That's kind of a big deal. Normally, you don't get signature discs until you win Worlds, or you win, I guess, a major. Probably get something for USDGC. But Calvin, still no major wins, but he is going to get a signature disc. And he's wrapped up for until the end of 2027. I mean, it's hard to imagine him ever playing for another company. No details, Josh, on anything about how much he's getting paid. I think we can guess at it. I would be highly confident it's in the middle six figures, guaranteed.
You think $500,000 a year? Is that
It seems reasonable, doesn't it? Like, he's not Paul and he's not Ricky, so I don't think Innova is about to sign somebody to $1 million a year. But he's certainly not going to be getting just like $100K. You got to think he's getting at least 250 to 300. That's the number.
Yeah.
And with like the market set around other players like, Kristen and Kona getting $150K a year. I mean, how can Calvin not be getting at least 300? Where it falls in that 300 to, 800 range, couldn't tell you. But I think he's going to be well compensated. And it seems to me that, he didn't want to play out what could have been a year with, there were other people bidding for him. We know this. And so, could he have gotten a bigger deal if he wanted to go somewhere else? I bet he could have. Honestly. But I think he wants to throw Innova. He's always thrown Innova. And he doesn't want to deal with the stress of trying to make a switch.
He said during his signing that the biggest thing for him is that Innova just lets him play disc golf and only play disc golf. That feels to me like, for Calvin, the biggest priority of any deal ever. Would MVP have ponied up and offered that guy $1 million a year for 5 years? Without a doubt in my mind. Would he be making YouTube videos about the new glitch coming out, throwing a catch disc on the beach in order to help market it? Probably. Calvin doesn't want that. That is just not. If he went to Dynamic Discs, would he be getting a cat disc out of a tree in a firefighter uniform? DD probably put out that ad, and Calvin called Innova and was like, "All right, let's do it now. I don't care what you pay me. I refuse to leave this company."
Like Calvin coming in on a chopper into a press conference. It's just like, it's not for him, is it?
It is not for him. And so that I think that is the biggest priority for him. So even if he is paid a little bit less, I think the $300,000 mark is probably that's kind of the number that came to my head. It is less, but he also has the disc royalties. He gets his name on one of the most popular molds of all time on the Halo Destroyer. And he's comfortable. He gets to play disc golf. He gets to focus on the disc golf and have a good time. And that's what's important to him. And so it's probably worth taking a couple or multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars less to just get to focus on the disc golf.
And who knows? We don't know what the market looks like right now. The market, it's not just, this is not football, right? There's not a salary cap. We're not talking about a situation where he should be getting X. The market might look different now than it did a year ago. Like, who knows? We don't have the sales figures, but would you be surprised, Josh, if sales overall net for the manufacturers this year were lower than last year?
Not even a little bit.
I wouldn't be shocked at all.
And
I mean, I was talking about this in the Reacts pod, but like, I have some friends who are super big into disc golf and have been for, 6, 7, 8 years. And they're watching less, they're playing less, they're buying discs less as a result. They're not consuming media as much either. I mean, we talked about this, right? This day was going to come. People were going to resume more normal lives, and other things are going to start to fill people's time. Doing solo activities like disc golf is going to get deprioritized in a post-pandemic world. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit. Now, I'm sure everybody's doing great, right? Don't get me wrong. Like the floor of everything has gone way up. But it may just be the case that, DD's looking at this $1 million contract they signed with Ricky, and they're like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe that wasn't the move. I'm sure they're going to be fine either way. It's a drop in the bucket of their overall annual revenue, but like, it could be that like it feels like an overpay, whereas a year ago it didn't. When Elon Musk said he'll buy Twitter for $54.20 a share, that made sense at the time. But what's the fair price you should be paying for Twitter now? 6 months later, it's probably like $25 to $30 a share. So he's going to get burned because valuations have fallen. It's possible that that's how the industry is feeling a little bit.
You also have to combine it not just with the industry slowing down after the pandemic boom, but you have to combine that with overall economic status right now, not just of the United States, but globally. The amount of people who are spending disposable income in the way that they were last year has dropped significantly. You just see the signs of economic distress. And so people are choosing not to spend their money on recreation activities to nearly the same extent. With gas prices going up, housing still increasing, interest rates increasing. It's just building a perfect storm where a piece of plastic is just not people's first priority right now of where they're going to spend their extra dollars. And so that's the other area that I think manufacturers are probably feeling a bit of a pinch.
Or even if they're not feeling a pinch now, they're looking ahead and they're saying we may feel a pinch. Disc golf has proven very recession resilient. We saw it in 2008 and we saw it again in, this COVID brief collapse of the economy. And so, I don't think disc golf's in bad shape in any way, but I do think that, we could see things settle a little bit. I think things are going to settle a little bit. We could see stuff starting to plateau. I mean, we saw DGN numbers, for example, this year going up, but certainly not to the kind of degree that we saw last year in terms of growth. So, the marginal gains are going to get tougher from here on out. But anyway, we know Calvin got paid. He definitely got paid. And Innova made the right call. I mean, they got this done early. They didn't give any chance for somebody to come in with a crazy bid late. They just said, let's do this thing. Let's get it done. And they got it done.
Want to talk player of the year then?
All right.
Let's
talk player of the year. It's not going to be Calvin Heimburg, although he had a very good season. Josh, we reran the numbers. We talked about this right before GMC, and it was like, what's going to happen here? If you win, who wins USDGC could have a big impact. And, the fact that it was Gannon kind of tilted the scales in Ricky's favor. And I think, Josh, now that Ricky has won the Tour Championship, for me, I think it's probably a wrap. I think Ricky is your player of the year in 2022. But let's look at the numbers. Take us through them.
Yeah, so Ricky finishes the season with 5 wins. He also has 8 podiums, 13 top 10s with an 8.6 average finish. Average major finish, I think, is the biggest knock for him. An 8th place finish was his average. And really didn't feel like he ever contended much at the majors again, which has been the story that we've kind of knocked a lot on Ricky this season and for the past couple seasons. And I think the hardest, we'll come back to it. I digress. Paul finishes with 2 wins, 6 podiums, 15 top 10s with an average major finish of 4. Still only has the world's win as the major. Paul didn't move a lot. Got a couple more top 10s, but that's really the big difference for Paul. Was in contention and had opportunities for USDGC, for example, but did not get any wins after our last show. Simon does pick up another win. That bumps him up to 4. He gets 6 podiums, 8 top 10s, an average finish of 19.3, and an average major finish of 33, which is just horrendous.
It's disqualifying when compared to Ricky.
Yep. And even if the wins were the same, that tiebreaker definitely would fall Ricky's way. But, if you're looking at just straight up wins, Ricky has the most. So Simon kind of loses out on that side. And then the other argument then would be making about how important a major is, especially the World Championships, which also disqualifies Simon. So either way you cut it, Simon kind of gets beat out by both Paul and Ricky. He wasn't good enough all season to stay in contention with Ricky, and he didn't win the biggest events like Paul, or compete as good at it well enough at the biggest events like Paul in order to make a case that way. So I think Simon falls out. I think the argument for Paul is it's just not enough right now. I think there's a really serious argument if Paul had won European Open. We would be having this conversation would be significantly more difficult. But we talked about how many wins is a major worth? Is it 2? Is it 2.5? Is it 3? Even if you made Paul's Worlds win worth 3 wins, Ricky still outpaces him in wins. Just convert that to 3. Paul gets 4, Ricky gets 5. And even if you like, you would have to weight the Worlds win astronomically high that I don't think is reasonable to give him a Player of the Year award. Because otherwise, I think Player of the Year becomes indistinguishable from the world champion if you do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and they end up basically identical average finishes on tour, Ricky and Paul do. And Paul, I mean, let's just say it simply. Paul played better than Ricky at the majors. That is a simple fact. But Ricky significantly outperformed Paul on the Elite Series. Significantly. And, of course, won the Tour Championship and won more money and was just, I think, more consistently playing at the highest level than Paul was this year. Paul brought it for the majors and kind of didn't bring it all that often the rest of the time. And Ricky brought it week in and week out. Mm-hmm. And, an 8th place average finish at the majors isn't great, but it's also not disastrous. It's not 33.25 like Simon.
Yeah, that's true.
I think ultimately, Paul's going to win, very likely going to win PDGA Player of the Year, because PDGA Player of the Year accounts for, you get a lot of points for doing well at the majors. And so by that standard, right, by a very objective point system standard that really rewards major performance, because I was just looking at it. Let me pull it back up. The scoring system, just as a reminder, you get 100 points for a win at a major. You get 60 points for a win at an Elite Series. So if you think about it that way, they're weighting majors 6 times more than Elite Series, approximately. And so, but you can finish all the way down in 4th place and still get 60 points at a major. And that's the, matches what you get for an Elite Series win. So, there's obviously different ways of looking at this, but I think from an objective overall, like when I put in my vote for the Disc Golf Pro Tour Player of the Year award, Ken Klein Player of the Year award, or whatever they call it, I'm going to vote for Ricky. Now, I think there's valid criticisms of like using the Disc Golf Pro Tour points system as a ranking criteria, because that drops 2 of the major results. Mm-hmm. And Paul would argue, I think, I should be rewarded not only for playing very consistently well, which he did, but I should be rewarded for playing really well at the majors. But I think you're right, Josh. For me, he probably needed to win at least one more in order to get over that hump of being, beating out Ricky. And I think if he'd won the Tour Championship, maybe we have a different conversation here too. It would be a much more murky, coin flippy type decision. But ultimately, Ricky wins the most important points series, which is the Pro Tour. He has the most wins by a good distance over Paul, 3 more wins than Paul, and wins really should count for a big bonus in my mind. And so I don't really know that the only real argument in Paul's camp is better performance at the majors and the World's win, which should count for a lot. I don't think Paul is like way down the board or something. I think Paul is ahead of Simon, for example. I think Paul's ahead of Simon. I think Paul's number 2 in the conversation, but it has to be Rick. It has to be Rick.
Yeah, I think the 2 major... Yeah, it's so hard for me, because what's significant to me? Okay, first off, I agree with you. I think it is Rick as well. Rick gets my vote. I don't think that the Player of the Year should give Worlds a 4-win weight or even an average finish worth a couple of wins as well. I don't agree with that.
Sure.
So I agree that it is Rick. Two things stand out to me, though. Number one, in a world where something like USDGC gets included as well, and there are 3 majors instead of 4 majors, or it's 3 majors that get counted instead of 2 majors, Paul beats Ricky.
Paul wins Pro Tour standings,
which is a really big
True.
deal to me, because Ricky's hat is always hung on consistency, but Paul is I guess my thing about Paul is that Paul is consistent enough. And in a world where I think it's going to get harder and harder to win the Elite Series events that Ricky did, all 5 of those, and you have more young players who are going to be taking some of those wins, Paul's resume sets up better for a Player of the Year candidate in 2023, 2024, and 2025, because it feels more sustainable than Ricky's does. I really just don't think you're going to see players who are winning 6 Pro Tour events or 5 Pro Tour events as the way to win their Player of the Year award. It's going to be you have a win or 2 on the Pro Tour, you have a major, and then you performed well at the other majors. That's how you're going to win in the future. And so yes, Ricky had a fantastic season. I don't know if we talked enough about Ricky's amazing season. However, I think it got significantly better by winning 2 of the last 3 events, or 4 events, I guess, with USDGC. It was very much heightened by the end of his season into what I think has been a now excellent season instead of just a very good season. But Paul's resume is more sustainable for a Player of the Year, and I think is going to be what the resume is going to look like for Player of the Year winners in years moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, like, how much do we weight major performance in assessing these kinds of conversations? Because if you really hold it above all else, then I think there's a real good case for Paul, because, you know, he's in the mix at USDGC until late. He's plays incredible disc golf at European Open and just gets beat out by an even more unbelievable performance from Eagle. He wins Worlds, and, you know, he was not really in the conversation at Champions Cup. But Ricky was not in the conversation at multiple majors this year.
Any major? Question mark?
And, well, I mean, he was in the conversation at USDGC until he kind of took himself out of the conversation.
He wasn't in final round, though. I don't know if we went into a final round. No, that's not true. Sorry. Ricky took second at Champions Cup. That's okay. I knew that was wrong. He had a second place finish at Champions Cup, losing out to Chris Dickerson, but it wasn't terribly close, if I remember right. Didn't Dickerson just get to walk it in? Anyway, I digress. Continue, Charlie. Sorry.
No, but I mean, I think it's a fair point regardless. At the end of the day, your decision for this is going to come down to how much do you weight major performance versus how much do you weight Elite Series wins? Because, you know, on an average finish basis, they're totally comparable. They're percentage points apart. And, you know, Ricky's 5 wins for me with the field is pretty similar at Elite Series and majors when it comes to competitiveness, is enough to overcome the fact that Paul won Worlds and played better at the majors overall. But, you know, I agree with what you say too. As we move forward in the future, I think the major performance is going to continue to increase in importance. And I just don't think it's quite enough for me to say that it should be Paul this year, because he just didn't play good enough at the non-majors. He just didn't. So let's talk about FPO. This is a tough one. So real
quick before you move on, we've got an email from Steve that I want to hit right now while we're on this conversation. Steve asks, do you think Ricky would trade all of his wins, points, and Player of the Year this year for a win at Worlds or USDGC? Steve thinks that it would be a good trade. Charlie, do you?
Gosh. No, I don't think so. I think Ricky, number one, I don't think Ricky would trade.
I agree.
Number two, I don't think it would be on net the appropriate trade-off.
Let me change the question just a touch. Flip Ricky and Paul's seasons. So you have another win.
Okay.
You have overall good major performance. You have Worlds, but you don't win Player of the Year. You don't win the Pro Tour point standings. You don't win the DGPT Championship, right? But you get the Worlds. And you have like a good season. It's not like a James Conrad season where you win Worlds, but don't really do much of anything else that season. Did that change your answer? Would you trade?
Oh, so you're saying if Ricky had the war,
right?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So if we swapped them and then they were offered the trade and Ricky was offered the trade, would he take the trade?
If Ricky right now, you said, Ricky, do you want to flip seasons with Paul? We're going to take that stat line that we just presented and flip it.
Here's a funny answer, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on why I think this is the answer. I think the answer is no. I think he wouldn't trade it. I think he would be like, Worlds, baby, 3X. That's the most important thing. And I'm not saying that to try to make fun of Ricky and say that he's just going to claim whatever he's done is the best. I'm really not. What I would say is this. There's a long line of economics research, and it shows that people are willing. Let's say I give you a mug. Okay, I give you a coffee mug. And they've literally done this experiment. They give somebody an item, like a mug or a pen, and they say, okay, what would you be willing, or they give you the items. And they say, what would you be willing to pay for this item? You know, a coffee mug, $5, pen, $4. And then they give you the item and they say, this is for you. You get to have this. You can keep this. You can take it home. We'll pay you $4 for it though. And you can give it back. And people consistently turn down the trade. And what it is that when you own something, you give it more value than you would be willing to necessarily pay for it if you didn't own it. And so I think that that's kind of what would be going on here. And maybe that makes my argument weak and that he should want the trade. But I think Ricky would look at it, and I think a lot of people would look at it and say, well, you know, like, look at the season he had. He had 5 wins. He won the Tour Championship. He won the most money ever. He won over $100,000 in prize money. You're going to trade that just for the Worlds? But then on the other hand, if you had the Worlds, you'd be like, wow, I want another Worlds. Like, I'm a 3X now. I just think that you can find value in both things, and you want to have the thing that you already have. I don't think Paul's season was good enough to want to trade Ricky's season, but I think if Ricky had the Worlds, he'd probably value the major win a lot.
So your answer is whichever season Ricky had, whether it was Paul's or Ricky's, you don't think he would trade? Okay.
That's what I would say. What do you say?
I think, and now in terms of Ricky, I think you're probably right? Creating that value. And it's very clear in Ricky's rhetoric that not only does he create that value as it's not a marketing ploy. He truly believes it, right? He's convinced himself that consistency and regular performance is more important to him. And maybe it truly is. Maybe he had to talk himself into it, whatever. But that is important to Ricky. And I think you're right that he would probably prefer that. I would say, though, I think whichever season, whoever has which season, you should always take the World Championship, though, because Ricky's record is going to get broken next season because the Disc Golf Pro Tour is going to put up more money at the finals, and there's going to be big money skins and whatever. It's going to get broken.
And what you'll be remembered for long term will be the major wins. 5
wins. Next season, we'll talk about it. I guarantee by 2024, we're hardly talking about it unless he does it again next year. That record about the most money is going to be broken tomorrow. Broken next year. Kristen almost had him on it, right? Like it's not the sport is growing too fast in purses for that to be any sort of a sustainable record. What is going to remain from Ricky's season this year in the history books, in the collective conscience of disc golf? Nothing that Ricky did is going to be remembered.
Then listen. So then I say back to you, if that's your argument, then why don't you give Paul Player of the Year? You just told me how we shouldn't overweight Worlds.
Because there's a difference between Player of the Year and there's a difference between the championship. There's a difference between MVP and a Super Bowl, in my opinion. You can have the best season, and I get it's a team sport. You can have the MVP season. Ricky did have the best performance. But when we look at overall performance, in terms of a career, it's not just on how many, and if Ricky breaks a record for number of wins on the Elite Series, then maybe, right? Maybe Ricky's career for Disc Golf Pro Tour Elite Series wins set some sort of a record, and then he'll be remembered for that. But when you look at overall career consistency, the typical measure of that consistency is your performance at the majors. And that's why it's not Paul's single worlds that wins him this player of the year or writes him into the history book. It's his collective winning of worlds 6 times. And I think Ricky would have been better off to get his 3rd worlds in order to stretch the time frame of Ricky's major wins and the era in which he is still winning majors for relevance in that general history book conversation. Okay.
Food for thought. Food for thought. Paul has 17 major wins lifetime. He's one shy of Climo. Ricky has 6 lifetime. He's one back of Feldberg in 3rd with 7. But Ricky does have the most career Pro Tour wins, one more than Macbeth. There's an argument to be made that Ricky, no matter how great he plays over the next 5 years, is never going to catch Macbeth in major wins. And he could have the title for most Pro Tour wins of all time. And he could hold it for a long time, maybe forever. It's possible. Does that affect your thoughts about
it
legacy?
Does. I think if Ricky's able to maintain and earn that record and keep it, I think that does affect it slightly. But I also think that I've said this before, and I got some flack for it, and some things I get flack for and I think about and I revise, and some things I get flack for and I double down. Leadstone being one of them. And I'm here to double down on this argument. Paul Macbeth is a once in a generation player. We talk about Gannon, we talk about Eagle, but it has yet to be proven.
They have to have years of performance to come anywhere close to Paul.
Correct. When the Paul Macbeth just story is like, when we tell of the Paul Macbeth story, there will be eras where Ricky is the primary antagonist, but that is how we will speak of Ricky. And I think that winning more majors later after the Lyme disease is a way that Ricky could have earned himself more prestige in that book.
It's like Federer and Nadal. Lots to think about. Let us know your thoughts. Upshot at ultiworld.com. Christian Tatar had a hell of a season. This is not really a conversation, but let's go through the numbers. She had 6 wins, 12 podiums, 12 top 10s. Her average finish this year was 1.73 at Elite Series and Majors. 1.73. Her average major finish was 1.5. She only played the 2 majors. She finished 1st and 2nd. Paige had 16 top 10s, more than Kristen. Played a lot more events than Kristen. Average finish was 5.4. She had 2 major wins, more than Kristen. Her average major finish, though, was 7. Look, there's just not really a question here. You know, if Kristen had played more tournaments, there would really be no question. But the combination of just absolute, outright, unbelievable performance every time she did step on the course, and her Worlds win, and her Tour Championship win, there's no conversation to be had, Josh.
Yeah. You know, there were 3 majors where... No, that's not even true. There were 2 majors where both were present. Both won one of them, and Kristen gave away hers to Paige. And
True.
Paige, an incredible victory at European Open. She deserves all the props for that, and deserves props for staying in it at Champions Cup. So the 2 majors is a big deal. And I think that that's an argument that, if you want to make the argument, it's the same argument about Paul, about having those additional majors. I think if Paige had Worlds instead of Champions Cup, flip that, give Kristen the Champions Cup win, but Paige the Worlds, I think you have a much more difficult conversation. But
I don't know if it's much more difficult.
I think
it would be more difficult, but I think it would still be Kristen. I think it'd still pretty clearly be Kristen.
But the combination of the Pro Tour Championship win, the Worlds win, and the overall, like, Ricky's had good consistency, but we knock him on average major finish. Kristen has had impeccable consistency. 12 tournaments, 12 podiums, not including the Throw Pink Women's Championship where she took 2nd. So it should be 13 and 13. She has just an exceptional season that we have talked about in so many different ways. And no matter how you cut it, I mean, this is going to be a season that I think we will talk about for a couple of seasons to come, at least. And she did get the world championship. And so I really do feel and agree with you that I think Kristen wins player of the year this year.
Special stuff. By the way, Paige is very likely to win PDGA player of the year. She just played more tournaments. And so there's a volume component to PDGA player of the year that really makes a difference. I also would like to note our rookies of the year as it stands right now on October 12th. PDGA rookies of the year right now, Robert Burridge is way ahead of Evan Scott and Thomas Kuhn, and Aria Castorita ahead of Emma Arp. Now, I think the Pro Tour rookie of the year conversation is a little different, and I actually don't know if those standings like exist right now. They might be on Statmando. Let me check that real quick. But there's more specific rules about what makes you eligible for Rookie of the Year. Rookie stats.
Is Isaac Robinson a rookie?
I think he is eligible. Yeah, so the Statmando has it. Isaac Robinson way ahead of Nicholas Antela and is going to win it in MPO. And Emily Beach is going to win it in FPO over Katie Tate.
If Nicholas Antela, if USDGC got included, does that make any difference for Antela?
Well, no, it says stats are from DGPT points events. I don't think it'd be enough. I mean, it would get him closer, obviously. But right now, he is 150 points back. Well, yeah, not quite enough.
I think, here's the question for you. If Nicholas Antela had won USDGC, does he deserve Rookie of the Year? I think so.
From a voting perspective, maybe. Isaac's got a pretty good claim after Tour Championship plus the Idlewild win.
Winning a major as a rookie.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're not wrong.
So, anyway, the what-if-isms there.
I know. So, much more to come. We'll talk more Pro Tour Championship stuff, the Barbasol, Nevin, spectator experience, all that good stuff on Thursday. We'll also get you ready for the big money skins happening over at Eagles Crossing. 50 grand to the winner. Yes. So we're talking about some serious dollars, and they're live streaming this on their own. They have hired GK Pros and then the Eagles Crossing ownership have hired a production company that does professional sports to come in, set up a crazy Wi-Fi network, run fiber to cameras on the course. Like, they are really going all out, spending big bucks, and they're going to do a live stream on their own, $15. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about big money skins and get you ready for that. It's kind of I don't know. It's like the encore at a concert, Josh. Just to bring it back full circle. It's like the encore after the 2022 season. So we'll get you all set for that on Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. He's Josh Mansfield. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. And we'll talk to you on Thursday right here on The Upshot.